to request Anand, Mr. Anand Ranganathan.
May I request you to not tinkle the bell just right now? Please give me 30 seconds. Good evening, everyone. What a real pleasure it is to be here at the Calcutta Debating Circle. For a scientist, CDC meant Center for Disease Control, which somehow seems quite appropriate. But I must thank the organizers as well as this enormous crowd. And also, last but not least, Dr. Sarkar, who I have to say has a very sardonic sense of humor in deciding the teams. I almost feel as if I've been abducted. Razia gundo mein phas gayi hai. You know, I tried to argue with him. I tried to bribe him with Louis Vuitton bags, but he said those have already been taken. Then I said, how about a couple of Ferragamo shoes? He said, those also are out of the market. Then I said, how about my pet Rottweiler? I can give that to you, Dada. Please do something. He said, no, that's out of the question as well. And finally, I said, I'll give you an annual maintenance contract of the money counting machines. That also did not work. So I'm sorry to say, Kunalda is incorruptible. By the virtue of him being incorruptible means he cannot join politics. So that's good news. Let me now begin. Journalism in India, ladies and gentlemen, was once a profession. It has now become a trade. It has no more moral function than the manufacture of soap. It does not regard itself as responsible advisor of the public, to give the news uncolored by any motive, to present a certain view of public policy which it believes to be for the good of the community, to correct and chastise without fear all those, no matter how high, who have chosen a wrong or a barren path, is not regarded by journalism in India its first or foremost duty. To accept a hero and worship him has become its principal duty. Under it, news gives place to sensation, reasoned opinion to unreasoning passion, appeal to the minds of responsible people, to appeal to the emotions of the irresponsible. Indian journalism is written by drum boys to glorify their heroes. Never, never has the interest of the country been sacrificed so senselessly for the propagation of hero worship. Now, I would want a show of hands out here. How many of you believe what I just said is true? Okay. Quite a lot of hands have gone up. Well, I must tell you that these were not my words, but rather verbatim, the words of Dr. Ambedkar on Indian journalism, spoken nearly a century ago. Nothing has changed in 100 years. You believe what you see, but unfortunately what you see is written by those who see what they believe. Objectivity has become a metallic object that must be left behind before the journalist passes through the newspaper threshold. The biases have stopped beeping altogether. Journalists have realized, forget the risk of losing government ad revenue or patronage for their organizations. They have realized that if they have to escape prison, they must please their political masters, be there in Delhi or in Bengal. In light of what Dr. Ambedkar said a century ago, the topic of the debate needs to be tweaked a little. It is not that journalism today is more intent on pleasing rather than presenting. It is that journalism has always been intent on pleasing rather than presenting. Journalism has always been the first defense of the crooked, of the propagandists, of those carrying an agenda. Ironically, as the quality of journalism plummets, the citizens have become more aware of the devious games being played at their expense. Social media has brought about democratization of voices that are heard. The journalists and those who control them detest this. Of course they do. But there is little they can do except to pass more and more draconian laws to curb freedom of speech. I can go on, but I realize that my interjection would not be complete without providing examples of how journalists, either viscerally or through political pressure, have stopped asking questions of those who most need to answer for in a democracy. Examples that illustrate how journalists are more intent on pleasing than presenting the truth. I begin with Modi. Just 2 examples out of hundreds would suffice. The annual budget is going to be presented in a couple of weeks' time. But did you know that 21% of the 45 lakh crore odd sum will be allocated for propping up 1,830 public sector units, out of which 400 are non-functional? Except Air India, there has been zero privatization. And as for disinvestment, the PSUs that are sold are bought by other PSUs. PFC, LIC, NTPC buying REC, Coal India, TDHC and NEEPCO. Nationalized banks are rife with corruption. Bad loans worth 14 lakh crores have been written off in the last 10 years, out of which only 2 lakh crores have been recovered. Meanwhile, 3 lakh crores have been infused in these very nationalized banks. And as if that was not enough, 3 lakh crores have also been infused into the loss-making BSNL. Why am I quoting all these figures of loss-making government businesses? Because it was in 2013 that PM Narendra Modi said that the government has no business to be in business. He repeated it in 2017, and then in 2019, and then in 2022, almost as a ritual. Every time he increased the business of the government in business. Now I ask you, in the last 10 years, has there been a single journalist who has dared to question Narendra Modi on this criminal hypocrisy? No. Let me take another example. In July last year, Modi accused the NCP and Ajit Pawar of being corrupt and perpetrating massive scams. The very next day, Ajit Pawar and other corrupt NCP leaders were inducted into the Maharashtra government run by the BJP. Did any journalist dare to ask Modi why? No. Has any journalist ever asked PM Modi why did the BJP demand arrest of the congressman Anand Singh accused of 15 forest crime charges, but then made him the forest minister when he joined the BJP? Why did the BJP demand an ED raid on YS Chaudhary, accusing him of massive financial bungling and fraud of 5,700 crores, but then reneged on its demand when Chaudhary joined the BJP? Who in the BJP changed the Vijay Mallya lookout notice from detained to inform, allowing him to flee? Why did the BJP demand arrest of D. Monserrat for child rape and burning down a police station, but then took back its demand when he joined the BJP? Why did the BJP demand an FIR against Kripa Shankar Singh for launching a book that claimed 2611 was an RSS conspiracy, but then went back on its demand when he joined the BJP? But if you think Modi is the only hypocrite in town and journalists are only concerned about pleasing him and no one else, you could not be more mistaken. Case in point are the next 2 examples. Agriculture contributes only 12% to our GDP, and yet 44% of our 515 million strong labor force is involved in it. In the West, it is 2%. Production to purchase the entire chain is archaic, almost medieval. The entire sector was crying out for farm reforms, but when Modi implemented them, Rahul Gandhi and Congress poured onto the streets opposing them tooth and nail. Ironical, because the 3 farm laws were almost verbatim promised by the Congress in its 2019 manifesto. Verbatim. Congress promised them. But because Modi implemented them, those very farm laws suddenly became black laws. But did any journalist dare to ask Rahul Gandhi why he and his party took a shameless U-turn and held the entire country to ransom for a year? Let me give you another example. 9 years ago, the High Court convicted the BJP for violating the FCRA Act and accepting illegal donations. It was a conviction that carried prison sentences, not just a rap on the knuckles. What did the BJP do? In broad daylight, on the floor of Parliament, 30 more seconds, Dr. Sarkar. Maybe a minute more because I need to bribe you. On the floor of the Parliament, the BJP amended the FCRA Act, going back all the way to the emergency to make the violations ineffective. The High Court was rendered toothless. Now, any opposition party would have lashed on to this blatant misuse of power. It would have come onto the streets, perhaps even brought the government down. This was a godsend. But the Congress did no such thing. In fact, the Congress supported the BJP in amending the FCRA Act. You know why? Because the High Court had also convicted the Congress for violating the FCRA Act. Did any journalist ask Rahul Gandhi why this thing happened? No. They only parrot what Rahul speaks, and finally, I need to, Dr. Sarkar, because I really need to bribe you. This is the end thrust. Please allow me just a minute.
Yeah, but since the amount is undecided, just wrap up quickly. Yeah.
Yes. Now, I have dealt with the so-called Godi media and the PD media. I guess the troika would not be complete if I do not mention Didi media. For years now, and I'm going to make sure that Telegraph never sponsors the CDC again. For years now, when it comes to
Now,
unpleasant...
you really need to wind up now. Yeah.
Okay. For years now, when it comes to unpleasant news regarding the state government, the media here has perfected the art of either staying silent or reporting it as news in brief on the 20th page, bottom left, font size 10. Perhaps they have learned their lesson, including the Telegraph, from the hounding and persecution of slapping the multiple cases on Avik Sarkar before he was forced to step down.
Anand, you really need to wrap up because I've got a job to go back to tomorrow. Yeah. Thank you very much. There isn't a job for me in Delhi. You'll get a chance again. Thank you.
Will you give me 30 seconds? Vox Populi. Vox Populi. Okay. So, as brilliant professors are slapped around and arrested for forwarding harmless cartoons and acquitted after 11 years, as journalists like Debamalia Bagchi are picked up in the middle of the night and thrown in jail, as 20,000 panchayat seats go uncontested because of murder, arson and loot, as ballot boxes are stuffed by Trinamool workers right under the gaze of the camera, as the High Court laments that FIRs were not registered in 60% of the cases of post-poll violence, as blood-curdling affidavits are submitted by half-dead women, as judges recuse themselves because of threats, as 40 crores of cash is recovered from the home of TMC conduits, as President COVID is compared to COVID, the Telegraph happily consigns itself to organizing debates, asking if journalists are more intent on pleasing than presenting. You say you speak truth to power, but it seems for you only Modi is in power, Didi is not. Finally, for my great friend, Thakurta, for my great friend, the issue now is no longer of journalists pleasing Indians. It has transcended our borders. So now journalists please foreign powers as well. So as China wrecks the world economy, kills millions through a virus that it helped deliberately spread, as China interns 1 million Muslims in concentration camps and demolishes 1,700 mosques, there is stunned silence in the editorial rooms of Hindu and the News Click. Ask why. This is where journalism is right now. I'm so sorry I've taken so much more time than I should have. Thank you.
Anand, you indeed have. Well, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, if you are a big Ridley Scott fan and had the opportunity to see the last film, Napoleon, as Napoleon in his life moved through Europe through the 78-odd Napoleonic Wars, one of the secrets of Napoleon's success was Napoleon never took any prisoners. And it is largely believed in the public speaking circle that when this advocate of the Supreme Court, a very popular author, speaks, he seldom takes prisoners. It's a pleasure to welcome to Kolkata, Sai Deepak.
Namaste. Am I audible? Yes. Jai Shri Ram, Vande Mataram and Jai Ma. I'm grateful to the organizers for giving me an opportunity to engage on the subject. As usual, it has come down to Congress versus BJP, even on a subject which I think is of great importance to people and the quality of public discourse. But since we have anyway entered this hammam, so to speak, let's see how many of us are clothed in this hammam. The subject that's been presented for today is that journalism today is more interested in pleasing rather than presenting. True to my, let's say, training as a lawyer, I'll try and split my submission at least in 3 parts, taking about 2 minutes each. The first is to present my position. The second is to present facts supporting the position. And the third is leaving it to the audience on the basis of my summary to draw their own conclusions. having appeared in certain politically incorrect matters, I'm used to taking on a hostile audience, so game on, no problem. First, I think the framing of the question or the framing of the proposition itself needs to be questioned for a slightly different reason altogether. When someone says that journalism today is more interested in pleasing than presenting, I think it's very convenient and mighty rich to reduce the scope of analysis only to 2014 to 2023. Because then it's almost as if there was a golden period of journalism that we have all witnessed in the past, and suddenly things have gone to the dogs. Before I proceed, I certainly agree with Mr. Gokhale on one point, and this is perhaps one of those rare instances where the twain shall meet, which is Telegraph certainly has the guts to get the rest of us to criticize the government because it can't do it itself. So I will certainly congratulate them for having developed the spine to shoot from our able shoulders. Thank you. Point number one. When we speak of revenue, when we speak of presentation of facts, and when we speak of sobriety in representation or reportage, so to speak, you must understand where all of this comes from. I would want to use Gangotri, but sorry, I don't wish to use Gangotri, which is such a pure term in the context of the Gandhis. I'd call it Gandhotri. Okay. The DNA of the media as it stands today is significantly forged and shaped by the crucible of the emergency. It is significantly forged by the Nehruvian legacy and the Gandhian legacy, not Mahatma Gandhi, but Indira Gandhi. Taken forward ably by her son Rajiv Gandhi and even by Sri Manmohan Singh, Dr. Manmohan Singh, the most educated Prime Minister of this country, apparently. First, independent India certainly saw enough voices which had the guts and the temerity and the audacity to question the Nehruvian government. However, the fact of the matter remains that the Nehruvian government did not display democratic tendencies. In fact, it demonstrated anti-democratic tendencies. The very first amendment to the Constitution with respect to free speech was promulgated and enacted because Mr. Nehru's government lost in the Supreme Court, thanks to Ramesh Thapar and Brij Bhushan, both of whom questioned the land reform policies of Mr. Nehru. So to overcome a judgment of the Supreme Court, he introduces the First Amendment, which has significantly broader, vaguer and blanket proscriptions against free speech. Something that was, of course, supported by the chairman of the Constitution, let's say, drafting committee of the Constitution, his law minister, so to speak, the lawyer to the government, Dr. Ambedkar. Now, why is this crucial? It's not as if this particular tendency was limited to the Nehruvian government, because the fact of the matter is, apart from instances under his legacy, it was under the emergency or during the emergency, the government developed a tendency to classify media under three categories: friendly, hostile, and neutral. These were revealed, these are documented facts. Based on their reportage, 12 days before the imposition of the emergency, during the emergency, they basically slotted these newspapers as friendly, hostile, and neutral. Now, which were these newspapers? Let me actually wash this dirty linen in public for a moment. Amrit Bazar Patrika, Hindu, and Hindustan Times and Times of India were classified as government-friendly based on the reportage before and during the emergency. Now, these are the voices which are apparently speaking truth to power. Now, why is this crucial? Emergency effectively led to a certain tendency where independent voices were told, fall in line or there will be repercussions in addition to loss of revenue. Now again, why is this crucial? Because revenue was a point that was raised. Most people don't know that the Press Information Bureau and the Directorate of Advertisement and Visual Publicity were constituted during the emergency to screen reportage and to ensure that people are effectively threatened on the basis of the government advertising they would get or they would not get depending on how they speak. Now this is important because when someone says that the job of a reporter is to only present, I'm sorry, no, it is not the job of a reporter only to present. The job of the reporter is to contribute to information discourse by elevating the course of public discourse and contributing to shaping of opinions and to formation of opinions. There's nothing wrong with it. Which means I'm perfectly comfortable with a journalist who at least wears his ideological proclivities on his sleeve as opposed to hiding behind the facade of neutrality. So what we have gone through all these years is the Indian traffic position, which is keep left, being the mainstream position as far as media is concerned, and the keep left position is presented as neutrality, so that whoever speaks against it comes out as the dictatorial right wing. You see how convenient this is and what kind of a trap you are in. Your position, which is ideologically biased, becomes a neutral position. Everybody else has to swing according to that. So the fact of the matter is, when opposition parties realize that the only way you get some column space in newspapers is by actually interfering with the media, the path to that has been paved by the government that has been in power for 40 years at the very least, thanks to the DNA that has been shaped under its regime. So it's mighty convenient to say that today it has changed. No, it hasn't. This has always been the case, and on this I agree with Dr. Ranganathan. Second, this is one example that I have to give before I close. I just have 1 minute. I'll give two more examples and I'll leave it at that. Perhaps someone should open the annals of history and take a look at the role played by Sri V.C. Shukla during the regime. Officers of the information service were effectively tasked together along with IPS officers to go after journalists and the reportage because they were expected to only present. Which is to say, you will not air an opinion except for plain, cold reportage of facts. So when someone says that the journalist's job is only to present, they're actually taking us back to the age of emergency, which is to say, you will not have an independent opinion. So I'm sorry, I don't agree that the job of a journalist is only to present as much as it is not their job to please. Today, therefore, there is a competitive race between both, let's say, national parties or people in the political spectrum, so to speak, to compete for the ability to weave their own narratives. This is something that was started by the great Pandit of this country, Sri Nehru, the fount of everything that's great in this country. Finally, from 1999 until 2014, or even thereafter, I would want to understand the number of times the Super Prime Minister of this country, the lady, was ever interviewed by any mainstream journalist. And if they ever managed to ask her questions such as, how difficult was it for you to say no to the position of the Prime Minister? How do you manage to wade through this politics despite your gender? When you aspire for the, let's say, for the post of the Prime Minister of the country, you're expected to rise above your gender as much as possible. So you actually handed the contender for the Prime Minister's position a victim card on a platter, and this, according to you, was fantastic mainstream neutral journalism? Please ask yourself what kind of questions you've asked of people in power in the past. 3, the number of channels in this country which are owned by political parties itself bears noting. From Sakshi TV to Sun TV to Jaya TV, it's owned across the board. So if we have such serious problems with corporate entities owning media, let's say voices, so to speak, or media platforms, why haven't these people actually started asking questions or actually filed a petition before the Supreme Court? Because every day, all sorts of petitions are filed before the Supreme Court, asking the Supreme Court to lay down guidelines with respect to political ownership of platforms directly. Why hasn't it happened so far? So I would only submit one final thing before I take leave of the audience. You're being played by both sides. And that's precisely why serious journalism is happening today, but outside the portals of mainstream media. Ultimately, the quality of journalism that gets support and traction is a reflection of the taste of the society as we stand today. So if you're serious about supporting serious independent voices, go for blogs, go for specialist portals, not mainstream media. Nobody is actually doing justice to your mandate. Thank you.